Dreamers Awake, Chapter 9. The sky was purple. Lydia tried to remember if there was some sort of scientific phenomenon that could explain why the sky was purple. It looked pretty. She stared up at it and then wondered what she was doing outside. Hadn't she just gone to bed downstairs in her creepy bedroom with the door that wouldn't stay closed? Why did she feel so weighted down, like she was moving through thick syrup? Her hands appeared in front of her and she waved them back and forth. They left images of themselves as they moved around, a trail of hands outlined in magenta. What was going on? Had she been slipped some drugs? Was she tripping right now? She wouldn't put it past Michelle, but after thinking about it, it seemed too mean-spirited, even for her. Michelle didn't like Lydia, but she doubted if she wanted her to get really hurt. Besides, where would Michelle get hallucinogenic drugs? Lydia stopped focusing on her hands and the purple sky and tried to feel what was under her. It didn't feel soft like her bed and pillow. It was hard and bumpy. She glanced to her side and saw gravel. Gravel that one would find on the side of a road, much like the road that went past Aunt Maggie's house. The road seemed to rumble underneath her, and she moved her head to look up. A car was coming down the road much too fast. I have to move, Lydia thought. She tried to get up, but it felt like there was a weight on top of her. She looked at the car again. Its horn blared as tears ran down her cheeks. She could hear a faint cracking noise amid the din of the car's rumbling and honking. She looked to her chest this time, and she saw what was holding her down. Sitting on her chest was the girl with a mashed-up face. Her eyes were blacked out and her mouth hung open. It sounded as if the honking of the horn was no longer coming from the car, but from the girl's mouth. Lydia cried and struggled, but she couldn't move. The girl was so heavy, as if she were made of lead. When she leaned forward and planted her hands on Lydia's shoulders, it felt as if she were glued to the concrete. The girl began to growl. "Get out! Let me go!" She spoke haltingly, as if she couldn't remember the words. "You're not me!" She screamed these last words and leaned hard against Lydia, banging her bloodied head against Lydia's head. Lydia woke with a start. She was standing next to her bed, which was rumpled as if she'd been struggling. Aunt Maggie stood in the doorway with a blank look on her face. "Aunt Maggie?" Lydia said. "Aunt Maggie?" Maggie echoed. "Stop! I'm already freaking out!" Lydia felt hysterical. "Freaking out?" replied Maggie. "Yes! Is this how aunts act when their niece is upset?" Lydia spat. "How aunts act?" Maggie backed away from the doorway, disappearing down the hall. There was a cough, and she reappeared again. "Lydia, are you okay? I heard some commotion," Aunt Maggie asked. Lydia looked horrified and crumpled next to her bed. "What's going on? Why did you do that?" Lydia began to sob. Maggie looked utterly lost and concerned at the same time, her brow furrowing. "Lydia, what's wrong?" Maggie went to gather the girl up in her arms, but Lydia crawled away. Maggie put her hand on Lydia's foot and she flinched. "It's okay, honey. It's me. It's Aunt Maggie. What happened? I'm getting concerned." Lydia sobbed and shook her head. "Why did you do that?" she sobbed. "Do what, honey? I just came downstairs and found you hysterical by the side of your bed," Maggie said. "No, you were already there. You were staring at me, repeating what I said. You freaked me out." Lydia was suddenly unsure of herself. "Sweetie, you must have been dreaming still. By the looks of it, you had a pretty bad nightmare." Maggie gestured to the bed. "I promise you I would never intentionally do anything to freak you out." Lydia looked confused and wiped her eyes. She took a deep breath. "You're right. I did have a nightmare. I must have still been dreaming." Lydia took another shaky breath. Maggie put her arm around her shoulders. "Okay, come on. Let's get you upstairs and get you fed. Maybe after you eat, you'll feel better," Maggie said. Lydia could smell coffee and bacon already, the scents bringing her back around to reality. She shuddered at the thought of her dream and went with her aunt through the basement. Out of the corner of her eye, she thought she saw a dark silhouette moving behind the privacy screen and the flicker of a television left on but muted. But she'd had enough of being scared, so she looked down at the floor as her and her aunt made their way up the stairs. "Are you sure you still feel up for shopping?" Aunt Maggie asked for the 5th time as she locked the front door. "Yes, I told you I'm fine. I really need to get some new clothes," Lydia said. They walked to the garage door and Aunt Maggie typed in a code. The automatic door rose. "Okay, if you're sure," Aunt Maggie said. "I thought we could go up north to the mall in Linwood. Parking is easier and free. Downtown can get a little nuts on the weekends, especially with spring creeping up on us." "That sounds fine," Lydia said. She climbed into Aunt Maggie's nondescript Honda sedan and fastened her seatbelt. "Great. There's some good restaurants around there, so we can easily grab lunch when we get hungry." Aunt Maggie clicked her seatbelt and started the car. They backed out into the driveway. It was a weird day of half sun, half rain. Aunt Maggie called it cloudy with sun breaks, which was something Lydia had never heard before. As they made their way up north, Lydia watched the buildings flash by. She tried to keep up the idle chatter as they made their way to the mall. She didn't want to think too much about her horrifying experience that morning. It was one of the worst dreams she'd ever had, and she'd had some whoppers when her mother was battling cancer. The feeling of helplessness had been overwhelming. Even the slightest thought of those feelings brought tears springing to Lydia's eyes. So she kept talking about music, movies, clothes, friends, until finally the car pulled into the parking lot and Aunt Maggie slid into a parking spot. "You're very talkative today. I like it," Aunt Maggie said, smiling. "Reminds me of your mom. We used to be so close." A sad look passed over Aunt Maggie's face, but she shook it away quickly. They had parked by Macy's. "Want to start here?" Aunt Maggie asked. "Sure, as good a place as any," Lydia said. The oppressive feelings had slowly melted away as they got farther from the house. Even Aunt Maggie seemed more relaxed. And even though the mall was crowded on this Saturday morning, the calm feelings only grew as Lydia and Aunt Maggie shopped. They browsed through shoes and bags quickly, then moved along to the juniors section of Macy's. Lydia selected several items off the clearance racks. They were trying to move all their leftover fall and winter styles to make way for the new warming months ahead, and there were lots of great deals. Lydia was surprised by how comfortable she was feeling with Aunt Maggie. They joked and laughed together as they shopped. Aunt Maggie found a few items for herself, and the two of them went into the fitting rooms together, taking turns coming out to show off and get commentary on their various selections. They spent over an hour in Macy's and were already feeling hungry when they left with their purchases. "Should we head to the food court, or do you want an actual restaurant?" Aunt Maggie asked. Lydia thought the food court would be all right, but the place was packed, so they opted for a restaurant outside the mall. They headed for Claim Jumper, one of Lydia's favorites, which was a stone's throw away from Macy's. Lydia liked this place so far. It reminded her a lot of many of the malls in LA, and she felt at home here. As they traversed the short walk to the restaurant, she glanced out at the nondescript parking lot. There were little mounds marking the end of parking rows, and there were palm trees sprouting from the mounds. Lydia was surprised. They looked healthy and strong, despite it being the complete wrong environment for them. "Wow, I didn't know palm trees grew here," Lydia said. Aunt Maggie laughed and looked at her. Lydia raised her eyebrows, trying to figure out what was funny about what she said. "Palm trees? Where?" Aunt Maggie asked. "On those mound thingies at the end of each parking row," Lydia said, gesturing without looking. Aunt Maggie looked confused. "You mean the grass and shrubs? I guess if you squint, they could resemble palm trees," Aunt Maggie said. Lydia looked back at the mounds. The palm trees weren't there anymore, and it was as if blurry lines covered each mound. Grass appeared, followed by some sad, wet-looking bushes. "What? They were just there," Lydia said. "It's okay, just a trick of the light. I think you still have Southern California on the brain, Aunt Maggie smiled. Right over here, let's get some food. Lydia stared at the mounds for another moment, then followed her aunt. That had been very strange. Now that she thought about it, of course they wouldn't use palm trees to landscape here. But Lydia swore they had been there. She pinched her arm quickly to make sure she wasn't dreaming. Claim Jumper, like them all, was crowded, but they were seated rather quickly and settled in to look at the menu. What do you think about sharing something? They have a problem with portion control at this place, Aunt Maggie joked. Lydia smiled. I don't know if we'd agree on what to eat, Lydia said. Oh, right, the vegetarian thing. You know, I find it kind of funny that this is one of your favorite places when you don't eat meat, Aunt Maggie said. Their salads are pretty good. Besides, you can't beat their cake, Lydia shrugged. I know what you mean. One slice is like an entire cake to yourself, Aunt Maggie laughed. The rest of their meal passed without consequence, but Lydia kept going back to that weird experience with the palm trees. She kept expecting the creepy girl with the mangled face to jump out at her at any moment. Things seemed to improve after lunch. Shopping proved to be a great distraction, but soon the sky was beginning to darken and Aunt Maggie was getting tired. I don't really want to eat out again. We should get home before traffic gets really bad, Aunt Maggie said. All right, Lydia said. Can we grab some froyo before we head home, though? Of course we can, Tilda, Aunt Maggie said. What? Lydia asked. Who's Tilda? Oh, Aunt Maggie sputtered. Slip of the tongue. Froyo for sure, Lydia. She began to walk quickly toward the froyo shop in the food court. Aunt Maggie, who's Tilda? Lydia asked. Well, Aunt Maggie sighed. Your mother seriously didn't tell you about this? I've never heard that name before. Well, except the actress, but you know what I mean, Lydia said. Aunt Maggie sighed again. All right, let's get our froyo and I'll tell you about it. The two women sat at a small table in the food court. All around them, children screamed, people talked, teenagers laughed, but their small corner seemed quieter than the rest. Aunt Maggie explained who Tilda was. Matilda, actually. Tilda was just a nickname. She was Aunt Maggie's daughter. They had lived together, just the two of them, for 16 years. Matilda was funny and sweet, popular at school and loved by her friends, all of whom Lydia had met. The tragedy was that Matilda had been killed walking home from school one day. The curve in the road by their house was a blind curve, and the person driving had been going too fast to stop. They struck Matilda, and she had been killed. It had happened only a year ago. Then Aunt Maggie had heard from her sister about her cancer and her choice to change her guardianship to Maggie. It was confusing, but she remembered how close her and Laurie had been and had said yes. I had no idea if I could handle having a teenage girl in the house again, but I had to try. It was the right thing to do. It's what Laurie wanted. I couldn't ignore her last wishes, no matter what had happened in the past, Aunt Maggie said. Lydia's eyes lit up with curiosity. Another time, Lydia. Aunt Maggie looked completely exhausted. Her eyes were shining with tears. It's a very painful story. I'll tell you someday, just not right now. Lydia nodded. We need to get home, Aunt Maggie said. Lydia nodded again. Just really quick, that's why you won't let me move upstairs, right? It's her room, Matilda's, Lydia said. Yes, Aunt Maggie said. I have what might be a really terrible and stupid question, Lydia said. Shoot, Aunt Maggie replied. Do you think Matilda is haunting your house? Lydia asked. Aunt Maggie didn't reply right away. Her face was unreadable. I believe there are such things as spirits, and those spirits can get restless. But I also believe there must be a good reason for them to hang around. Some kind of unfinished business, anger, sadness, maybe malice. Matilda didn't have that in her life. She was happy, well-loved, and treasured. There's no reason for her to still be in the house, Aunt Maggie said. Lydia noticed she didn't actually answer the question at all. Whether Aunt Maggie believed Matilda had a reason to be in the house wasn't the question. It was if she was still there. Lydia filed that away in her brain. What had been a lovely day had transformed into something gray and morose. The weather outside seemed to mirror the atmosphere of the car. A misty pattering of rain was scattering itself across the windshield. The radio played a pop song quietly in the background, but the mood felt tense. "I'm sorry I made you talk about Matilda," Lydia said quietly into the silence. Aunt Maggie's face softened a bit. "It's all right, Lydia. I should have told you right away. It wasn't fair to keep it to myself. We're living together now, a family, a team. I should have told you." Aunt Maggie patted her knee briefly. The sun broke through a patch of clouds and warmed Lydia in her seat.